I didn't expect my most difficult student to be the one I couldn't stop thinking about. When I first got the email, I almost declined it. Private tutoring needed. University level. Flexible schedule. Good pay. That part got me. I won't lie. Rent was creeping up, my freelance gigs were inconsistent, and I needed something stable, even if just for a few weeks. The only red flag was the note at the end. Student has had issues with previous tutors. Yeah. No kidding. Still, I replied. That's how I ended up standing outside a modern apartment building at 7:40 p.m., rehearsing introductions in my head like an idiot. I checked my phone again. Apartment 412. Neil, you've got this. I knocked. It took longer than it should have for someone to answer. Long enough that I almost turned around and left. But then the door finally opened, and... yeah. That was my first mistake. Douglas. Tall. Like, annoyingly tall. Broad shoulders, messy dark hair like he'd just run his hand through it 100 times. He was wearing a plain black t-shirt and gray sweatpants, and somehow it still looked like he belonged on a billboard. But none of that was the problem. The problem was his expression. Flat. Cold. Already annoyed. You're the tutor? He asked. No hello. No introduction. Just that. Yeah. Neil, I said, forcing a small smile and holding out my hand. He looked at it. Didn't shake it. Come in. All right then. I stepped inside, immediately aware of how quiet the place was. Minimal furniture, clean to the point of feeling staged. It didn't feel like someone lived here, it felt like someone stayed here. Douglas walked ahead of me, not even checking if I was following. I don't need a tutor, by the way, he said casually, dropping onto the couch. Cool. Great start. Good to know, I replied, setting my bag down. So why am I here? My mom, he said simply. She thinks I'm wasting potential. He even did air quotes. I nodded slowly, taking that in. I dealt with this type before. Rich parents, stubborn student, zero motivation. Still salvageable. All right, I said, pulling out my notebook. Then let's make a deal. We do one session. If you hate it, I leave and you tell your mom I'm terrible. That got his attention. He looked at me properly for the first time. Like he was sizing me up. You're confident, he said. Or broke. I shrugged. A pause. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. But close. Fine, he said. One session. We sat across from each other at the small dining table. I started asking basic questions, what he was studying, where he was struggling, what he needed help with. His answers? Short. Detached. Almost like he was doing me a favor by speaking at all. Economics. Everything. No. That last one was my favorite. Do you have any notes from your last lecture? I asked. No. Textbook? Somewhere. Assignments? He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Do you always ask this many questions? I exhaled slowly, leaning forward just a little. Do you always make things this difficult? There it was. A spark. His eyes sharpened, something almost amused flashing beneath the irritation. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then he smirked. Actually smirked. You're different, he said. I raised an eyebrow. From? Everyone else who tried this. Meaning? They usually try harder to impress me. I let out a quiet laugh. Trust me, Douglas. Impressing you is not on my priority list. Another pause. Longer this time. And then? Good. Something shifted after that. Not completely. He was still difficult. Still distant. Still acting like this whole thing was beneath him. But he started answering properly. He brought out his laptop. Found his materials. Even, shockingly, asked a question. And when he did, that's when I realized the second problem. He wasn't stupid. Not even close. He picked things up fast. Too fast. The kind of fast that made you wonder why he was struggling at all. Which meant one thing. He didn't care. And somehow, that annoyed me more than his attitude. You already understand this, I said, pointing at his notes. You're just not applying it. He shrugged. Maybe I don't feel like it. Why? Because it's boring. I stared at him. You're paying me to be here. My mom is. Still. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. And yet here you are. Trying. There was something in his tone now. Not mocking. Curious. I met his gaze, holding it. Yeah, I said quietly. Because I don't like wasting my time. Another silence. But this one felt different. He didn't look away. Neither did I. And for a split second, the air between us felt heavier. Like something unspoken had just slipped into the room. Then he leaned back again, breaking it. All right, he said. Show me again. And just like that, we were back to normal. Well, not normal. But something. By the time I packed up my things, it was almost 10 p.m. I hadn't expected to stay that long. You'll come back? He asked, standing near the door. Straight to the point. Again. I hesitated for a second. I thought you didn't need a tutor. He shrugged, looking at me with that same unreadable expression. Maybe I don't. A beat. But I didn't hate it. I huffed a quiet laugh, grabbing my bag. High praise. I stepped out into the hallway, turning back just slightly. Same time next week? He nodded once. Yeah. The door closed behind me. And as I walked toward the elevator, I realized something I really should have paid more attention to. He didn't hate me. Not anymore. But the way he looked at me before I left? That wasn't neutral either. And I had a feeling. This was going to get complicated. I knew I was in trouble the second time I knocked on his door. Not because I didn't want to be there. But because I did. Too much. That was the problem. The door opened faster this time, like he'd been expecting me. Douglas stood there, same messy hair, same calm, unreadable face, but something about him felt different. More relaxed? Or maybe I was just noticing more. You're late, he said. I blinked. It's 7:59. Still late. I rolled my eyes, stepping past him. Good to see you too. Didn't say it was good. Yeah, but you opened the door faster this time. That made him pause. Just for a second. Then he closed the door behind me, quieter than before. You talk too much, he muttered. And you don't talk enough. We balance each other out. He didn't respond to that, but I caught it, the smallest hint of a smirk as he walked toward the table. Yeah. Definitely trouble. This time, everything was already set up. Laptop open. Notebook out. Even a pen placed neatly beside it like he'd actually prepared. I stopped mid-step. Wow, I said slowly. You've evolved. Don't get used to it. Too late. I'm proud of you already. He shot me a look, but there was no real bite to it. Just sit down. I did. We got into it quicker this time. No resistance, no short answers, no pretending like this was beneath him. He still had that edge, that quiet arrogance, but now it felt more like a challenge than a wall. And I found myself leaning into it. So what's this? I asked, glancing at his screen. Assignment. Due when? Tomorrow. I froze. Douglas. What? You're telling me you waited until the night before to start? He shrugged. I work better under pressure. No, I said flatly. You procrastinate better under pressure. That got a real reaction. A low chuckle. Same thing. Not even close. I leaned over slightly, pointing at the problem. All right. Walk me through what you think you're supposed to do here. He started explaining. And yeah, just like before, he got it. Not perfectly. Not cleanly. But the logic was there, buried under laziness and half-effort. You see? I said after he finished. You already know this. He leaned back in his chair watching me. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Or maybe, he said slowly, you just want it to be true. I frowned. Why wouldn't I? He didn't answer right away. Just held my gaze. And again there it was. That same tension from last time. Subtle. But real. You're weird, he said finally. I blinked. Excuse me? Most people would just do the work for me and take the money. I leaned back, crossing my arms. And most people would fail you. I'm already failing. Not because you're dumb. I didn't say I was. No, I said, quieter now. But you act like it doesn't matter. That hit something. I saw it. A flicker. Quick, but unmistakable. His jaw tightened slightly. For the first time, he looked away first. Just show me the next part, he muttered. And just like that, the wall was back up. We worked for another hour. This time, closer. Not physically, at least not at first, but something about the way we leaned over the same screen, the way our shoulders almost brushed when we both reached for the keyboard. It felt different. Too aware. At one point, I reached over to correct something, and my hand brushed his. Barely. But it was enough. He stilled. So did I. For a second, either of us moved. Then he slowly pulled his hand back, like nothing happened. Wrong formula, he said, his voice steady. Right. Normal. Yeah. I cleared my throat, forcing focus. That's what I was fixing. We didn't mention it. But after that? The space between us felt smaller. Around 9:30 he leaned back, stretching his arms over his head. And yeah, I noticed. Of course I noticed. The way his shirt lifted slightly. The line of his stomach. The effortless way he moved, like he didn't even realize the effect he had. Or maybe he did. You good? He asked suddenly. I snapped out of it. Yeah. Why? You zoned out. Thinking. About? I met his eyes. Big mistake. Because now he was looking at me like he knew exactly what I'd been thinking. And for a second, I almost said something stupid. Instead, I shook my head. Your terrible work ethic. That earned me a quiet laugh. Sure. We finished the assignment just before 10. Well, he finished it. With help. Actual effort. I was weirdly proud. See? I said, packing up my things. Not boring when you actually try. It was still boring. Yeah, but now you're less likely to fail. He stood up, walking me to the door again. You always this annoying? He asked. Only with people who deserve it. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. And I deserve it? Definitely. Another pause. But this one wasn't tense. It was lighter. Easier. Same time next week? I asked. He hesitated. Just slightly. Yeah, he said. But maybe earlier. I raised an eyebrow. Why? He shrugged. No reason. But the way he said it? Yeah. There was a reason. And I had a feeling I was starting to understand what it was. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying everything. The looks. The pauses. The way he reacted when I pushed just a little too close. I'd dealt with difficult students before. That wasn't new. But this? This was different. Because the problem wasn't just that Douglas didn't like me anymore. It was that something else was replacing it. Something quieter. Something harder to ignore. And I wasn't sure which one of us was more aware of it. By the third session, I stopped pretending this was just tutoring. And I think Douglas did too. I got there early this time. 7:45. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. I told myself it was professionalism. Good habits. Staying consistent. Yeah. Sure. I knocked. The door opened almost immediately. Douglas looked different again. not in a dramatic way. Nothing obvious. But he was wearing a hoodie this time, sleeves pushed up, hair slightly damp like he just showered. And for some reason, that small detail hit harder than it should have. "You're early," he said. "You're ready," I replied, glancing past him. Everything was already set up again. He shrugged. "Didn't feel like wasting time." I stepped inside, setting my bag down slowly. "Wow. You're really changing. Don't make it weird." "Too late." He rolled his eyes, but there was no real irritation behind it anymore. That was the thing. The edge was still there, but now it felt like something he chose, not something he hid behind. We got to work. But this time? It didn't feel like dragging him through it. He asked questions first. Not many. Not openly. But enough. "Why does this part even matter?" he asked at one point, tapping the screen. "Because it connects everything else," I said. "You skip it, the rest falls apart." He leaned closer, looking at what I was pointing at. "Explain it again." I did. Slower this time. And I could feel it, the shift. Not just in him. In me too. I wasn't just trying to get through to him anymore. I wanted him to get it. Wanted him to look at me like that again, focused, actually listening. It was addictive. At some point, we ended up sitting closer than usual. Not planned. It just happened. The table wasn't small, but somehow we both drifted toward the same side, shoulders almost touching as we worked through a problem. Neither of us moved away. "Wait," he said suddenly, leaning in even closer. "That part, why is that negative?" I turned slightly toward him, pointing at the screen. "Because of the shift here. Look." I stopped. Because I realized how close we were. Like really close. If I turned my head just a little more. Yeah. Bad idea. I cleared my throat, leaning back just enough to create space. "You see it?" He didn't answer right away. When I looked at him again, he wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at me. Not intense. Not obvious. Just there. Like he hadn't decided yet if he was supposed to look away. "Yeah," he said quietly. But he didn't move either. I broke it first. "All right," I said a little too quickly. "Try the next one." He leaned back in his chair again, like nothing had happened. But I could feel it. That moment didn't disappear. It just settled somewhere between us. Around 9, he stood up suddenly. "I need water," he said. "Okay. You want something?" I shook my head. "I'm good." He disappeared into the kitchen. And I exhaled. Hard. What the hell was that? I ran a hand through my hair, staring at his laptop without really seeing it. This wasn't part of the job. None of this was. And yet, I didn't want it to stop. When he came back, he handed me a glass anyway. I frowned. I said, "I'm good." "Take it." I took it. "Thanks." He sat down again, closer than before. Definitely closer than before. "You get like this with all your students?" he asked. I blinked. "Like what?" "Trying this hard." I let out a quiet breath. "No." "Why not?" "Because most of them don't meet me halfway." He nodded slightly, like he understood that. Or maybe like he didn't want to admit that he did. "And me?" he asked. I looked at him. Held his gaze. "You're starting to." That did something. I saw it again, that same flicker. But this time, it didn't disappear as quickly. We didn't get much work done after that. Not because we couldn't, but because the focus kept slipping. Little things. Small distractions. The way he'd tap his pen against the table. The way I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way either of us called it out. At one point he said, "You don't look like a tutor." I frowned. "What does that even mean?" He shrugged, leaning back. "I don't know. You're just not what I expected." "Disappointed?" "No. Too quick. Way too quick." I smirked slightly. Good. He didn't smirk back this time. Just watched me. And again, that feeling. Like we were circling something neither of us had named yet. By the time I packed up, it was almost 10:30. Later than usual. Neither of us mentioned it. You staying longer next time? He asked, leaning against the door. I hesitated. That depends. On? You actually doing the work. He huffed a quiet laugh. Fair. I stepped into the hallway, turning back slightly. Same time? He nodded. Yeah. A pause. Then, Neil? I looked back. Yeah? He hesitated. Just for a second. Then shook his head. Nothing. I studied him for a moment. Then nodded. All right. The door closed. But this time? I didn't walk away right away. I just stood there for a second, staring at the door. Because something had changed. Not just in him. In me too. And I had a feeling. Next time? We weren't going to be able to pretend this was just tutoring anymore. By the fourth session, I already knew I should have stopped. Not because anything had happened. But because something was about to. I didn't knock this time. I was literally about to, but the door opened before my hand even touched it. Douglas stood there, phone still in his hand like he'd been waiting. You were just standing there? I asked. He shrugged. Heard your steps. That's creepy. You're loud. I'm not loud. You are. I walked past him, shaking my head. You're annoying. And you keep coming back. That? Yeah. That landed. I didn't respond. Just set my bag down like usual, pretending that didn't hit a little too close. Something felt off. Not bad. Just different. The air was heavier. Quieter. You okay? I asked, glancing at him. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Why? You're not talking. You complain when I talk. I complain when you're difficult. And now? I looked at him. He was already looking at me. Now you're something else. A pause. Then, what does that mean? He asked. I exhaled through my nose, dropping into the chair. It means sit down. We have work to do. Coward. We tried. We really did. For maybe 20 minutes, it was normal. Explaining concepts. Walking through problems. The usual rhythm. But it kept slipping. Every time I leaned in, I became hyper-aware of how close we were. Every time he spoke, I noticed things I shouldn't, his voice, the way it dropped when he focused, the way his eyes stayed on me just a second too long. It was getting harder to ignore. For both of us. Neil. I looked up. He wasn't looking at the screen. Yeah? You're distracted. I let out a quiet breath. So are you. He didn't deny it. Just leaned back slowly, studying me. What are you thinking about? He asked. Too direct. Way too direct. Your assignment, I said flatly. Liar. I almost laughed. Excuse me? You've been staring at the same line for 5 minutes. Maybe I'm thinking. No, he said, quieter now. You're not. That did something. Something sharp. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. All right, I said. Then what do you think I'm thinking about? Big mistake. Because now he leaned forward. Elbows on the table. Closer. You really want me to answer that? He asked. My chest tightened. Yeah. A beat. His eyes flicked to my lips. Then back up. You don't. Silence. Thick. Heavy. I swallowed, forcing myself to look away first this time. Let's just. I started, grabbing my pen. Focus. But my hand wasn't steady. And I knew he noticed. We didn't get back into the rhythm after that. Not really. It was like something had cracked open, and neither of us knew how to close it again. At one point, I reached for his notebook at the same time he did. Our hands collided. This time? Neither of us pulled away immediately. It wasn't accidental anymore. His fingers stayed there. Warm. Still. And I felt it, that same jolt, but stronger now. Sharper. Douglas, I said quietly. He didn't move. Yeah? I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, there was no confusion in his expression. No uncertainty. Just intent. You're making this difficult, I said. His lips twitched slightly. You always say that. This time I mean it. Good. That wasn't the response I expected. My heart kicked harder against my ribs. Good? I repeated. Yeah, he said, voice lower now. Because you're the one who said you don't like wasting time. I exhaled slowly. Don't twist my words. I'm not. His fingers shifted slightly against mine. Not grabbing. Not pulling. Just there. And somehow that was worse. Neil, he said. Quiet. Too close. Tell me to stop. I froze. Because I could. I should. That was the obvious answer. The right answer. But I didn't say that. I muttered. His gaze sharpened. Yeah, he said softly. I noticed. That was the moment everything changed. Not a kiss. Not anything obvious. Just that. The fact that neither of us moved away. That neither of us stopped it. That we both knew exactly what was happening. And didn't shut it down. Eventually, I pulled my hand back. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. This is a bad idea, I said, standing up abruptly. He didn't argue. Didn't try to stop me. Just watched. I'm your tutor, I added, like that would fix anything. I know. That makes this complicated, he finished. I nodded. Yeah. A pause. Then, are you going to stop coming? He asked. That hit harder than anything else. Because now it wasn't about the moment. It was about what came next. I hesitated. Too long. And that was enough of an answer. I'll see you next week, I said finally, grabbing my bag. I didn't wait for a response. Just walked out. But the second I stepped into the hallway, I knew. There was no going back to how things were before. Not after that. Not after the way he looked at me. Not after the way I didn't tell him to stop. I lasted 3 days before I realized I was completely screwed. Not because of Douglas. Because of myself. I tried to be rational about it. I really did. I told myself it was just tension. Just proximity. Just one of those weird situations where lines get blurry for a second and then go back to normal. Except, it didn't go back to normal. Because every time I thought about that moment, I didn't feel regret. That was the problem. Underscore 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 underscore. By the time the next session came around, I had already decided. I was going to fix it. Set boundaries. Keep it professional. Act like nothing happened. Easy. Yeah. Right. I knocked. This time, there was a delay. Not long. Just enough to make me notice. When the door opened, Douglas looked off. Not in a bad way. Just quieter. More controlled. You almost didn't come, he said. No hello again. I exhaled. I said I would. Yeah. He nodded slowly. You did. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. And immediately, that same feeling. Like the room remembered what happened last time. We didn't sit as close. That was the first thing. Opposite sides of the table. Space between us. Intentional. Obvious. And somehow worse. Let's just focus today, I said, opening my notebook. Okay. No attitude. No teasing. Just, okay. That threw me off more than anything. We worked. Actually worked. For almost an hour straight without interruption. It should have felt like progress. Like things were back on track. But instead, it felt like we were both pretending. Like there was something sitting between us, unspoken, getting heavier the longer we ignored it. Douglas. He looked up. Yeah? You're doing better, I said. He nodded once. I know. I blinked. That's it. What do you want me to say? I don't know. Maybe pretend to be impressed with yourself? He shrugged. It's not hard. There it was. That edge. But weaker now. Less defensive. You're impossible, I muttered. And you still showed up. I met his eyes. And just like that, everything snapped back into place. That tension. That awareness. It hadn't gone anywhere. We'd just been avoiding it. You're doing it again, he said quietly. Doing what? Looking at me like that. My stomach tightened. I'm not. You are. He leaned back slightly, watching me. Like you're trying to figure something out. I swallowed. Maybe I am. Then ask? Too direct. Again. Always. I hesitated. Because I knew if I asked, there was no going back to pretending. But I was already past that point, wasn't I? Why didn't you stop? I said finally. Silence. His expression didn't change. But something in his eyes did. You didn't either, he said. That's not an answer. It is. No. I shook my head. It's deflecting. He exhaled slowly, leaning forward now. Closer again. Not as close as last time. But closer. I didn't stop, he said, voice low, steady. Because I didn't want to. That? Yeah. That hit. Hard. And you? He added. I looked at him. Really looked. And I could have lied. Should have lied. But I didn't want you to either. There it was. Out. No taking it back now. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Like everything had just shifted into something real. No more pretending. No more guessing. Just truth. Neil, he said. My name. The way he said it this time. Different. What are we doing? I let out a quiet breath, running a hand through my hair. I don't know. Yeah, he said. You do. I shook my head. No. I know what we should be doing. And what's that? I held his gaze. Nothing. A pause. Then, that's not what we're doing, he said. And he was right. This time, when our hands brushed, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't hesitant. It just happened. Natural. Like we'd already crossed that line and didn't feel the need to pretend anymore. His fingers slid against mine. Slow. Intentional. I didn't pull away. Didn't even think about it. You're still going to tell me this is a bad idea? He asked quietly. I let out a soft breath. Yeah. Okay. But I'm not stopping. That made him pause. Just for a second. Then, good. The shift was instant. The tension didn't disappear. It changed. Less sharp. More grounded. Like we weren't fighting it anymore. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But everything else? Yeah. That line? Gone. When I finally stood up to leave, it felt different. Not rushed. Not panicked. Just aware. Of everything. You're coming back? He asked. Same question. Different meaning. Yeah, I said. No hesitation this time. He nodded. And for the first time since I met him, he smiled. Not a smirk. Not something subtle. An actual smile. And yeah, that was the moment I realized I wasn't in control of this anymore. I should have known the moment he smiled like that. There was no going back. The next time I saw him, it wasn't supposed to happen. That was the problem. It wasn't our scheduled day. I wasn't prepared. And neither of us had time to build up that careful distance we'd been pretending to maintain. I was walking out of a small cafe, half focused on my phone, when I heard it. Neil. I froze. Turned. And there he was. Douglas. Standing a few steps away, hands in his pockets, like he just casually appeared out of nowhere. Hey, I said, trying and failing to sound normal. What are you doing here? He asked. Coffee. I lifted the cup slightly. You. Was meeting someone. Was? They left. Something about the way he said it made me pause. You okay? He nodded. Yeah. A beat. Then. You're free? Too quick. Too direct. Same as always. I should have said no. I had things to do. Work. Responsibilities. Anything. But instead. Yeah, I said. We ended up back at his place. Again. No discussion. No plan. It just happened. Like it was inevitable. The second the door closed behind us. That was it. No table. No notebooks. No pretending. Just silence. Heavy. Charged. You didn't text, he said. I frowned slightly. About what? That you were coming. I wasn't. I know. A pause. Then. I thought maybe you wouldn't come back. That caught me off guard. Why? He shrugged, but this time it felt less like indifference and more like uncertainty. Because it's complicated. I stepped closer. Slow. Careful. Yeah, I said quietly. It is. We were standing too close again. But this time? Neither of us moved away. You still think it's a bad idea? He asked. I let out a quiet breath. Yeah. And? I looked at him. At the way he was watching me, no games, no attitude, just waiting. And that was new. That was different. And I don't care, I said. That was all it took. He closed the distance first. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just certain. His hand came up, brushing lightly against my jaw before settling there, steady, grounding. And then? He kissed me. It wasn't aggressive. Wasn't messy. It was controlled. But there was tension under it. Weeks of it. And I felt it immediately. The second our lips met, something in my chest tightened, like I'd been holding my breath without realizing it. My hand found his shirt, gripping lightly. Pulling him closer. Neil, he murmured, barely pulling back. And the way he said my name? Yeah. That did something. This wasn't like the tension before. This wasn't almost. This was real. I kissed him back. Properly this time. No hesitation. No second guessing. Just him. We ended up against the wall without really deciding to. His hand still at my jaw, mine gripping his shirt tighter than I meant to. Everything felt sharper. Clearer. Like all the noise in my head had just shut off at once. Still a bad idea? He asked quietly, his forehead resting against mine. I let out a soft breath. Yeah. A pause. Then I added, don't stop. That was it. That was the moment everything crossed from complicated into something we couldn't undo. Later, when things finally slowed down, we were sitting on the couch. Closer than ever. But calmer now. Less tension. More something else. You're not like I thought you'd be, he said. I glanced at him. You've said that before? Yeah, he nodded. But I mean it differently now. How? He hesitated. Then, I thought you'd be the type to walk away. That made me pause. Why? He shrugged slightly. Because you're careful. I huffed a quiet laugh. I was. Yeah, he said softly. I noticed. A silence settled between us. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Just real. This changes things? I said finally. He nodded. I know. And not just here. I know. And you're okay with that? That was the real question. Because this wasn't just tension anymore. This had consequences. Complications. Real ones. He looked at me. Steady. Clear. No, he said. I blinked. No, I'm not okay with it, he clarified. But I still want it. That? Yeah. That was honest. And somehow, that made it worse. Or better. I couldn't tell anymore. I leaned back slightly, running a hand through my hair. Douglas. I know, he said again, quieter this time. But I'm not going to pretend I don't want you. Silence. Because the truth was, I didn't want to pretend either. I thought things would feel clearer after that night. They didn't. They just felt real. We didn't talk about rules. Didn't define anything. Didn't try to make it neat or logical. Because it wasn't. I was still his tutor. He was still my student. And somehow, that made everything sharper instead of stopping it. The next session? It was nothing like before. And also exactly like before. I walked in. He was already there. Waiting. Same as always. But this time, when our eyes met, there was no pretending. Hey, I said. Hey. That was it. No attitude. No sarcasm. Just that. We sat down. Opened his laptop. Started working. And for a while, it actually worked. We focused. Explained things. Solved problems. Like two normal people doing exactly what we were supposed to be doing. But now, every small thing meant more. Every glance lingered longer. Every accidental touch wasn't accidental anymore. At one point, I leaned over to point something out. Here, this part, I said. He didn't look at the screen. You're doing it again, he said quietly. I paused. Doing what? Getting too close. I leaned back slightly. Then move. I don't want to. That was the difference. Before, everything was unspoken. Now, it wasn't. Douglas, I said, quieter now. He looked at me. No hesitation. No confusion. Yeah? This can't. I stopped myself. Because I already knew how that sentence ended. And I already knew it wasn't true. He tilted his head slightly. Say it. I shook my head. No. Because you don't believe it. I exhaled. You're making this harder than it needs to be. He smiled faintly. You said you don't like easy things. That's not what I said. Close enough. I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't trying to figure him out. I already knew. You're going to pass this class, I said. He blinked slightly, thrown off. That's what you're focusing on right now. Yes. Why? Because that's why I'm here. A pause. Then, and everything else? He asked. I held his gaze. That's separate. He didn't look convinced. But he didn't argue either. We finished early that night. For once. No dragging it out. No distractions. Just done. I packed my bag slowly. Not rushing. Not avoiding. Just aware. So what happens now? He asked. That question again. But this time, it felt different. Less uncertain. More grounded. I thought about it. Actually thought about it. Not just reacted. You pass your class, I said. He raised an eyebrow. And we stop pretending this is something it's not. He studied me. What is it then? I stepped closer. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just certain. It's not just tutoring anymore, I said quietly. A pause. Then, Good, he said. I huffed a soft laugh, shaking my head slightly. You're way too okay with this. I'm not, he said. And this time? I believed him. He stepped closer too, matching me. This is messy, I added. I know. It could go wrong. I know. You could fail anyway. That made him smirk slightly. I won't. I smiled. Just a little. Yeah, I said. You won't. A quiet moment settled between us. But it wasn't tense. It wasn't uncertain. It was steady. Neil, he said. Yeah? You're staying, right? Not just tonight. Not just for tutoring. I looked at him. At everything we'd already crossed. Everything we couldn't undo. Everything we weren't even trying to undo anymore. Yeah, I said. And this time, there was no hesitation at all. That was the thing about Douglas. I thought he'd be the difficult part. The complicated one. The problem I had to solve. Turns out, he wasn't the problem. He was the reason I stopped looking for one. And yeah, he still annoyed the hell out of me. Still pushed every button I had. Still made things way more complicated than they needed to be. But now, when he looked at me, there was no doubt in it. No distance. No pretending. And for the first time since I knocked on that door, I didn't feel like I was walking into something uncertain. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.